In the modern age of vehicles, it's extremely rare to get behind the wheel of a car and not have the burden or baggage of stereotypes or stigmas. And that is the benefit of rebooting a brand. This is the Alfa Romeo Giulia. That is the brand new Alfa Romeo Giulia QV, in probably the least interesting color you could possibly choose for this car. And as a testament to the design, it still stands out, it still turns heads, and I've had more people come up to me, pull up next to me in traffic and be like, man, that is cool. And it's more than once, and obviously it's not a fluke. And when you look at the front end of the Giulia, you got to admit, at least it doesn't look like every other car on the road. And that is because Alfa has their own unique grille design, whether you like it or not. Now, some people have said the front end looks a little bit smushed. I don't really see it, but the thing that stands out to me is this looks very FCA to me. It almost resembles the Dodge Charger Hellcat front end that I saw, with the way that the hood design is, with the venting and all that. If you got rid of the front bumper and the emblem, it just looks very similar to me. One of the best parts about the QV is the side profile of this. The way they've sculpted the sides, the rocker panels with the integrated carbon, the way that it looks from the side is one of its best features. It's so well thought out and so cohesive from the front to the back. A lot of cars you look at the front, you're like, wow, that looks good, and then it looks like somebody else designed the back half of it. You don't have that problem here, and it's one of the biggest pros. So what about those technical details? Well, we're going to deal with some of that in the shop. The basics here, the fit and finish, the panel gap, the paint quality is well above average. And it's such a breath of fresh air when you look at this and everything's so cohesive, unlike some of the Fords I just looked at where there's panel gaps so bad that it's a distraction. There's nothing here about the quality that distracts you at all. There are a ton of little details to talk about with the Alfa. But the biggest thing for me is these wheels. This wheel design is amazing and they are easy to clean. With the amount of brake dust that comes off here, I would choose these any day. Now, the thing I don't like is these bright yellow calipers, which just screams, well, I have a sleeper car, but I have nice brakes. This has the standard steel rotor option, which is more than enough, I think, for a street car. And then we get to some of the aerodynamic bits. So let's talk about it. 90% of this car was developed on a wind tunnel. This isn't just some faux, let me throw on some carbon fiber bits and little cutesy designs to make it look fast. No, this was really designed to have purpose. Your front splitter is active aerodynamics. It drops down at speed. The air inlets in the front bumper lead through the bumper themselves into the bumper wheel well and out the back into the side venting. All the way along the side of the car, these rocker panels are aerodynamically designed to move air around the back quarter panels, around the bumpers, and out the back smoothly. This whole car has thought to that, including the rear diffuser, and we're going to talk about that specifically when we get to the shop segment. When you think of sedans or saloons or four-door cars, you think practicality, daily drivable, usable. And when I opened up this trunk, boy, was I disappointed. This is a straight up chump space, let me tell you that. I couldn't even fit a small shipment of Girl Scout cookies, let alone the Girl Scouts themselves in this trunk. And I think I'm looking at it and I compared it side by side with some compact cars, and like modern Civics, the Elantra has a more usable trunk space than this. It's very strange. But then again, you know, you're gonna have to figure this out. Chances are if you're driving this, you have some other, you know, hauler that you're gonna use. Oh, and it's got this handy carbon fiber handle here to close the trunk. Scott, we are back after a long hiatus. It's been months.
Not long enough.
Yeah, I know, for you. We have the new Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio, or I just call it the QV. That's kind of what everybody calls it, is the QV for short.
Impressive.
You look good under this car.
I'm surprised it doesn't come with a mechanic in the trunk.
It should, but that's what you're for. I'm sure they'll hire you cheap. You can come out and tweak turbos.
That.
So I'm going to talk about the history of Alfa, or the Giulia, and that's something I said I wasn't going to do, and I'm going to take this from a different angle that most people haven't heard. Whether you know this or not, FCA had a stake in Ferrari, which meant they could utilize the resources, and they could also poach part of Ferrari's profits.
Is that why the F1 cars used to say Fiat on the side?
Yep, that's right. So that was back in 2013. The CEO of Fiat Chrysler contacted one of the lead engineers at Ferrari and said, you know what? You're coming over to Alfa Romeo. We're going to reboot this brand, relaunch it, and I need you to work on the new Giulia. And the best part is you only have 2.5 years to design and get this thing to manufacturing. Now, if you ask anybody in the industry to create a brand new model, clean sheet, from the ground up, to do this in 2.5 years is a joke. But that was the game plan. So the engineer from Ferrari, who was also the chassis engineer on the 458 Speciale, they had the Maserati engineers, they had the Ferrari drivetrain engineers, engine builders, all working on this car. So in 2014, so this started in 2013, in 2014, Ferrari announced they were going to separate from FCA. They wanted to be done. They were soaking up, taking their profits, all this stuff. So at the 2.5 year mark was the official point that Ferrari separated from FCA completely. They are no longer together. So the CEO of FCA knew this was going to happen, and he wanted to utilize all the Ferrari resources he could in that short amount of time.
Hurry up.
Yep, hurry up and get it done. So this is the byproduct of that. So now that we've got the history out of the way, the second thing to be said about that is you hear the words thrown around that this is Ferrari inspired. The engine's Ferrari inspired, all this is. And it's more than inspired. Really, Ferrari designed this. The aerodynamics, 90% of this car was designed in a wind tunnel, Ferrari's wind tunnel. The frontal airflow, all these aero panels, the entire way that the car moves air from the front to the back, straight back to a real diffuser. There's not too many cars you see that has a true diffuser that creates low pressure, all the things that are involved with moving air to the back of the car. Every little piece on this bumper helps to flow air around it. And it's just, again, another thing that Ferrari's stolen. And if you look at this back diffuser, it looks like something straight off the 458 or the 488. So this is more than Ferrari inspired. This will probably be the last Alfa. You can say that the chassis and all the miscellaneous drivetrain components were really designed by them. So the next thing to talk about is the components. There is use of carbon fiber on this front lip, which is motorized and lowers at a specific speed to create downforce.
Don't believe it.
You just have to see it on the video to believe it. The back spoiler is carbon fiber. The hood is carbon fiber.
The side skirts have carbon fiber
accents, and the roof is also carbon fiber. The second thing is the subframes are aluminum, front and rear. This has a dual motor electronic power steering unit, and it's really weird the way that the modes work with it. If you come out of reverse and into drive, you can tell it's almost like switching modes. It's a very strange feeling to have the dual motors in here. So there is extensive use of aluminum in the hubs, the knuckles. The front is double wishbone suspension. This has the standard steel rotor option. It doesn't have carbon ceramics, and unless you're going to track this car, I think it would be absolutely pointless. These brakes are so overkill as it is on the street.
No way.
Yeah.
No way.
You got to get on them. You got to get on. Oh, and let's talk about that. They are digi brakes.
Your favorite. NSX inspired.
No, even better than that. You know what they're called? It's called the IBS system.
And does it irritate your bowels?
It's. I can't believe that they named it something after that's universally known as irritable bowel syndrome. What is IBS?
According to Mayo Clinic, an intestinal disorder causing pain in the belly, gas, diarrhea, and constipation.
But the reason they did this IBS system is it incorporates into one module the electronic stability control, the ABS, so you don't have two different ECUs, and it can respond much faster than a traditional system. And it has to do with the master cylinder, and it's an electronic or mechanical assembly that is made by Continental that is installed in here. So this is probably what's going to be in most cars going forward. But this is something you're going to have to get in and drive yourself and see if it's something you can tolerate, because I really don't like it. And the second part is all the drive modes. It's something this car doesn't do well. A lot of cars allow you to adjust what you want the suspension to be versus the transmission operation, the throttle mapping. You can't change any of that. You're stuck with the hard set modes. You can kind of tweak the damper setting, but not really. You're stuck with what the computer does, and I think that's a lost opportunity here. Transmission. This is one thing that is not Ferrari. Has nothing to do with any performance car, particularly. It is a torque-converted 8-speed ZF transmission. And you would think that it would be a turd, because we see a lot of these cars with too many gears, that it's gear hunting all the time. Again, we talk about this with the Lexus and some of the other cars that do torque-converted transes. It works so well on the street. In race mode, it really does respond almost like a dual or a single clutch transmission, and then it gives you the smoothness in your everyday driving. Now, this was specifically designed for this car or modified. The clutch packs in it, the way that the shift behavior is programmed is specific to the QV, and it's able to queue up gears even from like 6th or 7th down to 3rd, so it's always ready to downshift or get into the right gear if you're shifting fast. So it is a nice benefit. The exhaust, it is a dual, and it has electronic controlled baffles.
Ooh.
And if you're in dynamic mode, the baffles open up automatically at a certain throttle position. Now the thing is, it doesn't have an exhaust mode button, which people complain about. You have to go into race mode to have it loud all the time, which I think is why a lot of people operate the car in race mode to begin with, to get the exhaust sound.
Why wouldn't you?
I don't know. It should just be on all the time, or at least give you an option. Again, it's a lost opportunity with a lot of electronics on this car. You would think it would allow you to customize more of this stuff, but the exhaust note is amazing on here. It really is good without being annoying. So as we get to the back, this is really where this car separates itself from so many other cars, including the BMWs, the Mercs, the Audis. This is truly designed on a wind tunnel. This Aero panel is really a part of this entire diffuser assembly. Now it is two pieces, but the way that you have these air directional vanes that lower wind turbulence, help direct air to the diffuser, it's the real deal, including having outlets here from these little vents that flow out to the exhaust port. So it's able to get the car from the front to the back.
I think this is an inlet, not an outlet.
Well, an inlet to the outlet in the exhaust port, sorry. So many cars now, performance cars, you're starting to see this. And I think the first one that we saw in the shop was the RCF that had the TVD, which was optional. Torque vectoring differential, and I'm just gonna call it TVD. This car has one of those. And it uses two clutches in the differential, one for each wheel. And it's able to really infinitely control the amount of power that goes to each wheel in the back. What's really beneficial about that is it eliminates a lot of the rear wheel drive phobia that people have. It's able to put down power so well, assuming that your tires aren't worn out like these are, that I would have almost no issue recommending this car to most people. I think it's very controllable because of that. It's not like your typical torsion diffs that, once they kind of lift a wheel, you're in trouble. This always feels like it's putting down the power, even when you're driving it like an idiot. So that's a huge pro to it. The rear end is a brand new multi-link design, and it's hidden under this Aero panel, which we're not going to remove. It just looks like a massive subframe, an aluminum carrier that extends this whole part, and I'll put up a picture. But this is new for them, and this chassis and all the suspension will be carried over. This architecture will be used in other vehicles in the Alfa platform, likely their new SUV or their new SUV. So yeah, that should be interesting.
Got a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I know, no doubt.
What's the minivan coming?
I wish it had a minivan. That would be awesome.
They should make it a barf TNC,
Oh man, I would love to drive that.
rear wheel drive, proper.
Yep. We complained about, what was it, the Lexus and some of these other cars that have like 140 series treadwear tires. This car,
This is a record.
this is a record. This has 60 treadwear tires, and that, yes, they are sticky, but it makes no sense on a car like this. And I know I did some research from the owners forums, and people are,
Did you see that?
it actually sticks in the tread, it's so
Right.
soft. I mean, this compound is just stupid for the street. People that buy this are already swapping out the tires right from the factory. That's about it for the underneath. Let's take a look under the hood, Scott. Those rocks out of here. So we are under the hood, Scott. What do you think?
Looks like a lot of plastic.
Yeah. It's definitely not the most pretty engine layout, is it? But then again, it doesn't need to be, because this is trying to be, it's not trying to be some exotic, so they don't have to spice it up with all the premium materials, carbon fiber inlet
Well,
ducts.
there's no room. Well, right, but there's no room for a whole lot of that.
No, there
But
isn't.
this does look Ferrari-ish.
It is shoehorned in here, and this is a good time to talk about this. People talk about, again, when we started this, Ferrari inspired. No, Ferrari designed this. A lot of this is Ferrari, including this engine. This is based on the F-154 V8, that the twin turbo motor that is in the Ferrari California T, the new motor. That's flammable.
I'm glad they put a flammable sign on your AC.
Well, at least the AC holes are in a serviceable place.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, everything should be in a serviceable place on this car.
Yeah, it should be, you're right. So this is, again, it is a Ferrari-derived engine with 2 cylinders stripped off. So they've taken the same idea, twin turbo, 2.9 liter V6.
2.9.
It's a 2.9, and these turbos are capable of producing 35 PSI a boost. That is
Each or combined?
combined. So that is why this car is able to generate 500 plus horsepower out of a 2.9 liter, which is really incredible. And the curb weight of this car on the scales is around 3,700 pounds. Plus or minus with some fuel in it or driver, but right around 3,700 pounds. This is a lot of motor for the weight of this car. We'll see you next week. Oh, what's the next car, Scott?
Honda Civic, probably.
You know, one of the strangest things about driving the Alfa in a civilized manner, in A mode, when the motor has cylinder deactivation going, it feels like a 3-cylinder. It's always lugging. The transmission's in the highest gear possible. To me, I can't just wrap my head around why you'd want to drive a car like this in such a mundane fashion. But the reality is you can do that. And the plus side of it, of course, is you get much better fuel economy. But that begs the question, you know, why waste your time doing that in a car that just has so much performance? I have not been able to drive this in this mode for very long. It just doesn't feel natural to me. All right, let's talk about ride quality, because that's one of the most important things if you're going to buy a car like this. If you wanted hardcore performance, you'd buy just a straight up sports car, no compromises. So how does this balance the sports car idea with kind of like the touring machine, the daily driver? And I think the straight answer is this is still a very firmly sprung car. It doesn't matter what mode you're in. When you're kind of in the eco modes, it's the softest setting. And really the way these dampers work is they're adaptive. However, it goes from kind of soft, medium to firm. And on regular street driving with kind of bad pavement, you want to be in soft all the time if you have the option to choose it. When you're doing more performance driving on the street, medium is your best bet, and firm is just way too much on the road. Whenever you get on bad pavement, it is just, you feel it in every bone of your body, and that's what you're getting with a sporty car. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just something to be aware of. Now, on concrete surfaces, this will give you a little bit of that over-dampened feel. The rebound rates go up on the dampers and you get this kind of springy effect, namely when you go higher up, mid to the sportier shock settings, you do get a little bit of bounce, but it's not that offensive. I would say this is not on the luxury car ride. It's not a luxury car ride. It's definitely more of a sports car ride, if anything. All right, it's time for me to put my hat on because we're getting serious now. Let's talk about the performance aspect of this car. And this is the big highlight of why you would even buy it. I'm gonna put this in race mode, and really race mode is the only way you can, it's the only way you can turn off all the driver's aids. You have to be in this mode exclusively to do that, and it's kind of annoying. Also for the street, I have to turn off the race mode damper setting and go to mid, which makes it a lot more livable to drive every day. Now in this mode, you have full control of the transmission. It will bounce off the rev limiter, it will not auto upshift. Let's take a look and see how it handles some of the turns. These tires are so ridiculous for the street. I mean, I would change these tires immediately. It takes so much heat to get these things going. And the brakes, let's talk about the brakes. They are so sensitive. I wish there was a way to adjust the sensitivity of them, because they come on, just you breathe on it a little bit and you feel like you got full clamping force. And on the street, when you're not suspecting it, it just feels way overkill. It takes a lot of time to get adjusted to it. Since it's all digital, you might as well just have an adjustment for this to manually do it yourself. This car turns in lightning fast. Steering is so fast in here that if you're not used to it, you're gonna turn in way early on every apex. Again, it's one of those things you have to adjust to driving this car because everything happens so quickly. Whether that's a good or a bad thing is kind of up to you. Now, with cars with TVDs or torque vectoring differentials, rear wheel drive becomes less of an issue. And it becomes less of an issue because it's always trying to put down its traction. You never feel like you're going to lose control of this car. Even in race mode with traction and stability control off, it's amazing how well it puts down its power, even with a cold set of really extreme summer tires. Now I'm going to come to a stop. Getting off the line in this car, people will complain, well, there's too much lag to get it off the line if you just hammer the gas. Okay, there's the acceleration. So there's like a 3-second, 2-second delay. Now if you brake torque it a little bit, bring up the revs, then you just roast the rear tires. Man, this thing is so quick. And the trans is just it's so enjoyable to downshift and upshift this gearbox. I know that people will complain we need a manual gearbox, and I think that would take it to the next level if you're really, that type of driver, but this gearbox is really good. The one thing I can tell you that this reminds me of, and it's a direct comparison, is the Ferrari 488. I had that car on the street and on the track. It has the same sense of acceleration you get from the 488. how smooth those turbos come on. It feels like you're being pushed by this massive tailwind. You're just surged ahead so fast. You keep grabbing gears. You want to keep going. I can see this thing hitting 190 miles an hour. I know they rated at that with all the aerodynamic treatments and all the little things that they've done on this car. There's no doubt it would just absolutely fly. Part of the experience of the Alfa is the way that it sounds inside and out. It just sounds so unique, and from the outside it sounds amazing. This is exhaust tuning when the baffles are opened up electronically. I mean, it's really hard to beat. That's something they do amazing, and it's something that gives this vehicle a lot more personality than the BMWs and the Audis and the Mercedes that are out there. Well, of course, you don't see a lot of these yet. So the next thing really is kind of these stupid paddles. And I know people are going to argue, well, this is how you want paddles set up. You want it on the column versus the steering wheel. And I find that even with this quick ratio, you constantly have to adjust your hand to hit the paddle, especially when you're starting out in first. If you're in first and you want to grab second right away to avoid some kind of tail happiness or wheel spin and you want to grab second, I'm constantly having to adjust my hands. I'd always prefer it on the wheel on a street car. I think the biggest pro of this car is just how unbelievably fast and balanced and just planted it is in pretty much every situation. I would say if you got a more reasonable set of tires or just had these in extreme hot where you had grip, it would be amazing for what this is. You wouldn't expect a kind of a sedan like this to have almost high-end sports car behavior in turns, braking, acceleration. It's just something else. It really is a special car. I think, you know, the exclusivity of it, there's not a lot out there. People are constantly noticing it. It's just really cool, really fun to drive until, that is, you start driving it like a normal person on a daily commute and you realize there's so much lost potential there that it makes it a very confusing car all the way around. Some might argue this is not hardcore enough. You know, it's a sedan, it feels like a sports car, why not just go all the way? Well, the straight answer to that is you buy an Alfa 4C if you want hardcore and just uncompromised. This gives you a lot of what the 4C gives you in a daily drivable package. You can put people in the rear seats, kind of. You can haul stuff. It is a very usable car. It's just teetering like a lot of these vehicles I talk about of being absolutely overkill on the street. It's just so fast and so capable, you're never going to use 90% of this. And it makes it, to me, almost a dangerous experience. I'm constantly having to set the speed limiter in the infotainment where it will slow, won't let you go over a certain speed because I'm always flying in here. And it depends on what type of person you are. If you're more laid back, you might like this. But for me, man, I'd get in a lot of trouble in this car. Oh, the inside of the Giulia. If you covered up this badge and you told me this was a brand new car, my first guess was this would be a Mazda Speed 6, brand new. This has so much resemblance to the interior detail of those cars that it's uncanny. I almost wonder if Alfa benchmarked them for a budget affordable interior. Now that may sound like a knock, but it really isn't. The only problem with it is at $77,000, you would expect more of a boutique interior because some of the competitors do it better. But you know what? It's not that big of a deal because a lot of the money has been funneled into the engineering, the underneath, the underpinnings of the car. So you have to sacrifice where you're putting the cost into, or the price tag of this car goes up so much that it becomes totally unattainable. And this interior is not a bad cabin. It's not a bad space at all. It's really well thought out. The choice of materials, where they put leather surfaces, Alcantara, carbon fiber, it all works really well. Now, yes, you can't hide the hard plastics, which look like a standard budget economy car. There is some budget appointments in here, but again, it's so well thought out. It looks so good that it's not going to offend most people. Now it's time for some isolation. When you close this door, it really does seal out the outside. You don't get any buzzing or rattling in here, and this car has 10,000 miles on it, so take that for what it's worth. But it's a lot quieter than you would expect. Even when that exhaust opens up and the baffles open up, even in race mode, the burbling's even controlled. You don't sound like you're in just some aftermarket shit box. And I like that part about this car. It maintains an element of kind of luxury solidity with sports car. So once I roll down this window, one of the best parts about this Alfa's interior, and it's a standout feature, are these seats. They are amazing, not only to look at, but to sit in if you're the right body type. The Alcantara centers run along the top all the way down to the lower thigh cushion area, and the thigh cushions do extend on both seats. The bolstering is tight without being like concrete, but I will tell you, the EPA says this is a mid-size car, and you feel it. It is a more fitted cabin. If you expect this to be kind of a roomy, larger interior, if you're a bigger person, you might have a little bit of a hard time in the hip area, the shoulder area. The roof line is really good without a sunroof. I don't think you're gonna have a problem there. The seat adjustability is also superb. Now, there are a few things about this interior I take exception about, and they're things that you just can't believe that they did. The first thing is the seatbelt buckles. Normally they are attached to the physical seat, so when you raise and lower it, it's easy to put your seatbelt on. Well, with these seats, if you're shorter or you're a straight up hobbit and you have to move this seat up to see over the steering wheel, that seatbelt buckle is way down there because it's attached to the center tunnel. So you have to struggle to fight to get to it. And if you're a bigger person and you have the seat up, it's going to be really annoying. The second thing are these cup holders in the doors. I mean, they're a joke. I don't know what you're supposed to fit in here, which means you're stuck using the front cup holders, which obscure the damn HVAC. So those are two things that are really annoying about the practicality of the car. The next few gripes might sound minor, but it's these things that add up over the course of ownership. The first thing is when you close these doors and you try to adjust these seats, it's really difficult to get your hand down along the side because the door panel to the area where you adjust the seats is really tight. To add more problems to that, the buttons and switches on the side are so petite. It's like they look good when you see them, but trying to use them is kind of a joke. And you know it's a problem when your passenger gets in for the first time and they have no idea how to adjust the seat and they're asking you like, well, how do I adjust it? And you just want to kick them out of the car. The next thing, and I've never complained about this on a modern car, is the rear view mirror. You can adjust this thing so far to the right, but when it comes time to move it to the left, I can't move it to the left enough based on my seating position. It just kind of gets stuck on the plastic. So I can't see the extreme edge of the left rear window out of this car. And with the visibility being so poor in here, it's a big deal. And you wonder, why is it like this? Well, of course, they have to stick all the crash mitigation and all the frontal collision sensors up here. So of course the damn mirror doesn't work like it has for the past 100 years. Now there's a ton of other little gripes that really don't add up to much. When you're in race mode and you leave the car without the key if you leave the car with the key in your pocket, it doesn't tell you the key's missing. It just beeps and beeps. It doesn't really tell you what's going on. And it's just a strange inconsistency with the software. In that vein, the chimes in this car are really annoying. I mean, if you have it on loud mode, you can hear it like 50 feet outside the car. It's crazy. So you have to turn it down, but even then it's really loud. If you don't put your seatbelt on right away, this thing will, it's like a drill in your head. But let's move on to the infotainment because that's kind of a big area to talk about. Now, infotainment in modern cars has been a thorn in so many people's sides. It's so rare that you talk to somebody that's like, oh, I love the software in my car. You just don't hear it. It's indicative of how bad it really is. In the case of FCA, I will give them credit. Most of their Uconnect systems are pretty good overall. They're actually one of the best. And when you play around with this, it's kind of a derivative of that, but you can tell that, I don't know, the UI design has been lifted here from kind of Mazda and BMW. It seems very iDrive to me. Getting around is about average. It's easy to get around with the controller. It's up, down, left, right, you push to click on the screen that you want. There's no touch screen, and that's kind of a pro here. It's just a nice matte screen. You can't touch it. You can't interact with it. But overall, there's not a ton of lag with it, but there's just some quirks, like Bluetooth connectivity. When I get back in the car, it doesn't start auto-playing my music again when I reselect it, like pretty much every other car does. The other thing is I found a bug in the software the first day I was driving this that crashes the infotainment every time. It just locks up the screen and you can't do anything. If you're driving in race mode and you go into safety and you try to click on the lane departure warning tab, it freezes the screen up and you can't do anything else until you turn the car on and off. And I'm not sure if it's just the software version of this or not, but it's just, again, how do you not find these bugs in manufacturing? People want to know about the back seat of sedans, and really, for a sedan, you would expect that it would have usable space. And I guess usable is kind of depends on who you are. I think for me, even with this front seat back, it's doable. It's not particularly comfortable. These seats are they're very flat on the bottom. This isn't the most usable back seat space in a midsize car for sure. So now that I got that off my chest, I will have to say I really like the interior space of this specific Giulia. It fits the personality of the car. Everything works well. It's a sporty, really well supportive interior space. I like it a lot. There's very little to complain about in here in terms of true connected to the car motoring. And that's just something you don't find in a lot of modern cars. They did it really well. I think all these little gripes that I have are things that they can fix over the life cycle or the next generation. I would highly recommend you get in this car and see what you think of it and if what I'm saying kind of matches up to reality. The final thoughts. Usually I'm extremely reserved about new cars, vehicles that have a ton of hype. The Giulia is no different for me. But I have to say, I was extremely impressed with the level of performance that this car offers, not only for the price, but kind of for this platform. It's almost dumbfounding how much you can jam into an almost average everyday car. 10 years ago, this would be a supercar. There's no doubt about it. The transmission performance, the engine performance, the suspension, the damping, the tires, the brakes, everything works at such a high level, as it should be, coming from most of this is derived from Ferrari experience. And that's the thing that makes it extremely special for this model. The second thing that it does for me is it does feel like something more boutique. People look at it, people notice it. It's not played out. There's not a ton of stereotypes attached to this brand yet. In a world just filled with BMWs, Mercedes, Audis, this really does stand out at this point. And I think that's the biggest draw for me. From somebody that just sold an E92 M3, this thing is so much better in so many ways, but it also has its defects. Some of the software is not that configurable. The ride is a little bit too firm. And the biggest thing that raises red flags is how quickly this car was developed. Now, if you're somebody that is an early adopter, you want all the glitz, you want the glam of the Alfa Romeo brand's reboot, you're gonna love this car. It has been an absolute pleasure to drive it, just the short amount of time that I have, and I think anybody that gets into it will share a lot of the fond feelings that I have.